All right, folks. Chapter 21, Schizophrenia. Pigs in a Parlor. This is known as the Schizophrenia Revelation given to Ida Mae Hammond. And for some reason, I've done chapters all around it. I didn't mean to skip it. I apologize. Schizophrenia is a very common problem. Some authorities in the field of mental illness estimate there may be as many as 50 million persons in the United States who are afflicted to some degree with schizophrenia. Schizophrenics are estimated to make up about 50% of state psychiatric hospital admissions, with 300,000 new cases every year. Some cases are acute while others are quite mild, requiring no professional treatment. Schizophrenia has remained a very baffling problem to mental health professionals. The cause and cure has remained shrouded in uncertainty. The disturbance, distortion, and disintegration of personality known as schizophrenia or dementia praecox is frequently encountered by the deliverance minister. Almost every person who has come to us for deliverance is found to have varying degrees of the network of demon spirits which cause schizophrenia. The Lord has graciously given us a special revelation on the problem, which enables us to restore many to wholeness of personality. Since the revelation came to my wife, Ida Mae, I have asked her to write the remainder of this chapter. The Schizophrenic Revelation by Ida Mae Hammond. We were working very closely in deliverance with a person who did not show much improvement after repeated ministries. This person was very earnest about wanting deliverance. She loved the Lord very much. She believed with all her heart that deliverance was the answer to her problems, and she cried out to the Lord in desperation. She was completely cooperative with the ministry. Nevertheless, the overall results were disappointing. Time after time, we felt that the victory was gained. For a few days, her personality would show signs of stability. Then suddenly everything would go into upheaval. We would be right back where we started. Then one night, after an especially violent upheaval, I was awakened from sleep. The Lord was speaking within my spirit. The Lord said, I want to give you a revelation of what is Sarah's problem. The problem is schizophrenia. Now, I was not knowledgeable on the subject. In college, I had studied some psychology, enough to be familiar with such general terms as manic depressive, schizophrenia, paranoia, psychosis, and neurosis. I reached back in my memory to recall that schizophrenia is sometimes referred to as split personality. The Lord gave me this definition. Schizophrenia is a disturbance, distortion, or disintegration of the development of the personality. You will no longer call her Sarah, but Sarah 1 and Sarah 2, for she has more than one personality in her. I was still in bed, still had sleep in my eyes as the Lord continued giving the revelation. He instructed me to put my hands together, palms facing with my fingers laced together tightly. He said this represented what the schizophrenic nature was like. Each hand represented one of the dual personalities within the schizophrenic, neither of which was the real self. They were tightly interlocked. The Lord said, your hands represent the nest of demon spirits that make up schizophrenia. I want you to know that it is demonic. It is a nest of demon spirits, and they came into this person's life when she was very, very young. I will show you how it operates. Next, the Lord instructed me to take my hands apart very slowly. As my fingers were slowly disengaged, the Lord showed me that these demonic spirits in the schizophrenic must be separated, cast out, and given up. The process requires time. It is a shock to the person to discover that so much of his personality is not the real self. He may be afraid to discover what his true personality is. He needs time to adjust and to fall out of agreement with the false demon personalities point by point. He must come to loathe the schizophrenic personality and fall out of agreement with it. The Lord recalled to my memory Amos 3:3. How can two walk together except they be agreed? One by one, my fingers were disengaged, illustrating the pulling apart of the demonic personalities. Later, each finger was given a demonic designation. The last two fingers to come apart were the middle finger on each hand. The Lord showed that these fingers represent the core of the schizophrenic, rejection and rebellion. When these are finally separated, the person can consider himself healed, delivered, and knowing who the real self is. The control demon is called schizophrenia or double-mindedness. The Bible says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James 1:8. This is the scriptural designation of a schizophrenic. The Amplified Translation says, for being as he is, a man of two minds, hesitating, dubious, irresolute, he is unstable and unreliable and uncertain about everything. He thinks, feels, decides. James 1:8 Amplified. The phrase translated two minds comes from the compound Greek word literally meaning two souls. The next stage of the revelation came a few weeks later. The Lord instructed me to draw the outline of my hands on paper. Then he named the fingers as various demons and showed me how each demon set itself up in the schizophrenic. The control demon of schizophrenia invites other demons in order to cause the distortion of the personality. Schizophrenia always begins with rejection. It commonly begins in childhood or infancy and sometimes while the child is yet in his... Sorry, it went to this. So there, you can pause. That's the best I can do right now. How can I get that right? Did I really show it? Nope, not showing it. Maybe it's showing something. Okay. Mother's womb. So to complete that phrase, it commonly begins in childhood or infancy and sometimes while the child is yet in his mother's womb. Okay, so on this right here, this is the right hand. So if you draw a right hand on a piece of paper, in case you can't read all this, this is the left hand. The middle finger is rejection, fear of rejection, self-rejection. Pointer finger, self-accusation, compulsive confession, fantasy, lust, harlotry, perverseness, insecurity, inferiority, jealousy, envy, fear of judgment, self-pity, false compassion, false responsibility, depression, despondency, despair, discouragement, hopelessness, suicide, guilt, condemnation, unworthiness, shame, pride, intolerance, perfection, vanity, frustration, ego, imperfection, unfairness, withdrawal, pouting / unreality, fantasy / daydream, vivid imagination, self-awareness, timidity and shyness, loneliness, sensitiveness, talkativeness, nervousness, tension, fears of people, mental insanity, germs, etc. Rebellion. Okay, this says number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, this is number 5. I'm not really sure why there's not a number there. This finger is 6, 7, 8, 9. So this finger says, this is paranoid, obviously. The real self. Hurricane. Okay, so if you're writing this down so you can follow it according to the reading. Number 5 says suspicion, distrust, persecution, fears, confrontation. 6 says accusation towards others. This says judgment underneath the middle finger. rebellion, self-will, selfishness, stubbornness, self-deception, self-delusion, self-seduction, control, possessiveness, anger, hatred, resentment. Root is hatred, resentment, violence, unforgiveness. It says of bitterness, violence, unforgiveness. Do those lines. That says anger, a line coming down. This says bitterness, murder, retaliation. So this is all of this one is inward. And it says, keeps one from giving and receiving love, both God's and man's. Number 1. Number 2, so correlation with these numbers. Weds, so the wedding ring has to do with lust and stuff. Weds on the world, it says weds on to the world for love. 3, makes one tell all, seeking attention, punishment, and correction. 4, includes inordinate affection for animals. So number 4, insecurity, inferiority. Number 5, with honesty at all costs, seeking evidence for suspicions. Number 6, keeps one from looking at self, disobedience, and anti-submissiveness. Weds one to selfish desires, both mental and spiritual, seductive, to tempt, mislead, decoy, delusions, a misleading of the mind, false belief, fixed misconceptions, as to cling to a delusion. In psychiatry, a false belief regarding the self, common in paranoia. Okay, so that's what these pages say. Sorry if it's not very good. We are 12 minutes and 25 seconds in case you want to mark that as a skip point. Okay, so after the mother's womb, there are many causes for rejection. Perhaps the child was not wanted. It may have been the wrong sex desired by one or both parents. The conditions in the home may have been unsettled. There are many doors that lead to rejection. I think the mic will be better with this. Schizophrenia can be demonically inherited. Notice I said demonically. By that I mean it is not in the blood system, not in the genes, it's in the demons. In other words, demons seek to perpetuate their like kind. It is easiest for them to do this within a family. For example, suppose the schizophrenia nature is in the mother. The demons will pick out one or more of her children to feed down through. The schizophrenic mother feels rejection. She is the one who is primarily responsible for feeding love into the family. She is the one who touches, handles, and fondles the infant. The rejection within herself creates problems in her relationships with the child. So the child is open for rejection by the mother's instability. I repeat, schizophrenia always begins with rejection. Now, one can have a rejection spirit and not be a schizophrenic. In other words, it is all in the matter of forming a personality. You can have a rejection spirit and still manage to form your own personality and be secure in yourself. To the contrary, the schizophrenic is always floundering. Who am I? The identity of the true self is confused or lost. Rejection, shown on the left hand in the illustration, is the control demon in one of the personalities set up with the schizophrenic. Rejection depicts a withdrawn type personality. It is feeling within, it is agony within, it is a starvation of love, it is insecurity, it is inferiority, It is fantasy. It is unreality. It is all on the inside. Quote, I don't share in this. This is one personality the demons set up. The second personality set up by demons is rebellion. See the middle finger on the right hand in the illustration. When a child does not have satisfactory love relationships in life, he grows up being unable to feel and share in love relationships. A rebellion sets in. He begins to fight for love, or he lashes out at those who have starved him of love. Rebellion asserts itself in stubbornness, self-will, and selfishness. Here is another personality. This one is not inward and withdrawn. It is aggressive and lashing out in anger, bitterness, resentment, hatred, and retaliation. The schizophrenic is literally under these two opposite powers. He can switch from one type personality to the other in a moment's time. The Lord showed me that I was to refer to the schizophrenic person as Sarah 1 and Sarah 2. The Sarah 1 being the real person, and the Sarah 2, the schizophrenic personality, which has two sides to it. Therefore, there are really three personalities involved: the real personality, the rejection personality, and the rebellion personality. In 30 minutes' time, one may see all three personalities manifested. Naturally, this brings much confusion to the person himself as well as to others around him. The real person is neither of the hands. The real self is shown in the illustration between the arms at the bottom. The demons have not permitted the real self to develop. The schizophrenic does not know his real self. When the schizophrenic begins to be delivered, the real self must have Jesus. Jesus must start growing in the person, developing that personality, and making it what he wants it to be. This is why the schizophrenic deliverance requires time, sometimes several months, or even a year or longer. The deliverance must work in balance with the development of the real self. It cannot be rushed, for there is nothing for the person to fall back upon. If every demon in the schizophrenic person was suddenly cast out, he would feel totally lost. Identity with the real self requires time. As the schizophrenic nature is knocked out, the true personality must come forth to replace it. Let me illustrate what can happen when a schizophrenic is in the process of deliverance. He may be learning submission to authority. He's faced with a test. There's a situation where he's required to be submissive. He's not in the habit of being submissive. What will he do? Will he fall back into rejection? Go to his room, cover his face, refuse to talk to anyone? Or will he fall back into rebellion, expressing anger, becoming defiant, showing stubbornness? Or will he permit the nature of Jesus to come forth, cooperating, yielding to authority, becoming submissive? The decision is his. He must be willing to fall out of agreement with the demons to break old habit patterns. The real self must have become strong enough in Christ to carry through on the right decision. On the illustration, you will see a swirl at the top between the two hands. This represents a hurricane. The schizophrenic person continually creates storms around himself. He is caught in these storms, and others must relate to what is happening. Notice that some of the arrows also carry swirls or hurricanes. If the person trying to relate is also unstable, he brings his storm into the schizophrenic storm. You then have a storm within a storm. Other arrows are straight. This depicts persons who are stable and can relate to the hurricane in a stable way. Such a person can engage the storm without being damaged or scarred. He is not captured by the turmoil. The deliverance minister must be able to come in as a straight arrow. These times of storm cause the root of bitterness to form. See the right hand, and to be driven deeper and deeper. Now let us see what the other fingers on the left hand represent. The ring finger is designated lust. The Lord showed me that this demon weds a person to the world for love. Lust is rooted in rejection. If one has not received satisfactory love through the normal channels of life, the carnal nature will begin to search for its kind of love, sensual love. Thus, the door is open for the demon of lust to enter. A companion spirit in this group of fantasy lust, which may cause the person to imagine he is some great lover of the motion picture world or of fantasized sexual experiences as a prelude to overt acts. The harlotry spirit in women may first manifest itself in dress and provocativeness. Sexual perversions represent extreme attempts to overcome rejection. Sexual experiences, real or imaginary, can never satisfy the need for genuine love. They are the devil's substitutes for real love and leave a person ridden with frustration and guilt. The little finger on the left hand represents insecurity and inferiority. This is yet another manifestation of rejection. The person who has a deep sense of rejection feels insecure and inferior. The index finger on the left hand is self-accusation. This demon causes a person to turn against himself and tear down his sense of personal worth. In most cases, we have found self-accusation coupled with compulsion to confess. For example, if a person has fallen into immorality, he cannot rest until he has confessed his wrongdoing. He usually confesses to those who should show him the most love. He is driven to do this in an effort to shock others into giving him forced attention and thereby find a substitute for love. Now, let us move to the right hand in the illustration. The middle finger in the illustration is designated rebellion. As we have seen, rebellion identifies one of the false personalities set up by the demons. This group of demons may be considered compensating spirits for rejection. Rebellion is the opposite of rejection. One is expressive and turbulent, and the other is withdrawn and insecure. The ring finger on the right hand represents self-will. This demon weds a person to selfish desires. This opens the way for stubbornness, selfishness, and unteachableness. Again, we see the compensation for rejection. Since the person has been rejected or fears rejection, he is driven to pamper self, to push self. He is thereby trying to overcome feelings of rejection. The index finger is called accusation. It too is a compensating demon. It draws the attention away from the rejection. It seeks to eliminate a concentration on self by calling attention to others. The left index finger points at self. I am to blame. While the right index finger points at others. You are to blame. The accusation demon opens the door for companion spirits of judgmentalism. The little finger on the right hand is self-deception. Its companions are delusions, self-seduction, and pride. These three spirits of self inflate pride. Pride is another compensation for rejection. One who feels rejected wants to feel important. The spirit of delusion comes along and says, you are really somebody. You are a spiritual giant or some other kind of giant. The ego that has been wounded appears to be given a boost, but it is all demonic. It leads to greater frustration and disappointment. In one case of ministry, the spirit of self-deception had convinced a 13-year-old girl that she was 19. She took on another name to go with her other person. She attempted to think, talk, and act like an older girl. She was pushed beyond her abilities and her normal maturity. It added greatly to her oppression. Through the revelation, the Lord showed how the thumbs represent the paranoid phase of schizophrenia. Part of it is represented in the spirits of jealousy and envy. Those who are deficient in a reciprocal love relationships become jealous and envious of those who do experience satisfying love. On the rebellion side are spirits of distrust, suspicion, fears, and persecution. There is another demon in this later group, and it is called confrontation with honesty at all cost. Suspicion and distrust build up in the person until he is compelled to confront the other person. After the confrontation, the pressure dies down within him for a while, but it leaves the attacked person to handle his wounds. The person acting under the influence of paranoid demons is quite insensitive as to how many wounds he causes, yet he is supersensitive to every offense toward himself. The revelation portrayed in the fingers and thumbs has proved to be infallible, as judged by numerous ministries with schizophrenics. There is no flaw in it. The demons listed down the left hand are representative of other spirits that are commonly found within the rejection side of the schizophrenia pattern. This will have some variations from person to person. The listing is suggestive rather than exhaustive. It is apparent in most instances that the demons listed on the left hand are in some way associated with the triad of rejection-type spirits: rejection, fear of rejection, and self-rejection. The listing of demons on the right hand include control and possessiveness. They are directly related to rebellion. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. 1 Samuel 15:23. This verse can be interpreted two ways. First, I interpret it to mean that to God, rebellion is as abominable as witchcraft itself. I also interpret it to mean that one who has a rebellious nature has the nature of a witch. The purpose in witchcraft is to control. It is the controlling of another person by knowingly or unknowingly employing the power of evil spirits. Rebellion often leads to control. Now, let us continue down the right hand. There is a root of bitterness. It is in all of life, one does have conflicts. Things do happen, and words are spoken that require an attitude of forgiveness. Here lies the problem with the schizophrenic. He is unable to forgive. He has an unforgiving spirit. The things that happened 30 years ago are just as alive as they were the minute they happened. The root of bitterness is kept alive, and out of it comes resentment, hatred, anger, retaliation, violence, and murder. There can be many other demons attached to such a root of bitterness. How does the schizophrenic come out of this tangled mess? The three main areas to conquer are rejection, rebellion, and the root of bitterness. As these areas are conquered, the house, quote, house, parentheses, life, must be filled with the giving and receiving of love by submission to every valid authority and by forgiveness of all persons, regardless of the circumstances. When these three areas are conquered, the other related spirits lose their strength. Determination is necessary. The person who can persistently say, I will be different, I will not let demons rule my life, will eventually see victory. Between the hands at the bottom of the illustration is a little stick figure called the real self. As the deliverance takes place over a period of time, the real self must rise up, depicted by arrows, and part the false schizophrenic personalities by falling out of agreement with all of their influence and all that they represent. The real self must take on the nature of Jesus himself. Spiritual exercises such as Bible study, praying, fasting, praise, and fellowship with other believers is essential to a successful deliverance. These spiritual exercises will also accelerate the deliverance process as the person's life is filled with the positive things of Jesus Christ. It is hard work for both the schizophrenic patient and the deliverance minister. I greatly admire schizophrenics who fight through to victory. I admire these victories above all other deliverances. The schizophrenia deliverance is the deepest, most involved, and most determined deliverance that we have encountered.